we hope will be a very interesting discussion. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm very delighted to welcome you to this virtual chat on empowering women to trade green to commemorate International Women's Day. And I really hope we'll all have a very interesting discussion. I am Annette Ssemuwemba, the Deputy Executive Director at the Secretariat for the Enhanced Integrated Framework here at the World Trade Organization. I'm your moderator for today's discussion. And I am thrilled to have a distinguished panel join us today, which I will introduce shortly. I'm really pleased to see so many of you participants. We have policymakers with us, we have entrepreneurs, we have trade experts, the media, and many more experts. And thank you all for joining us from wherever you are. I'd also like to recognize and thank the organizers of this coffee chat here at the Executive Secretariat for the EIF, the WTO's Trade and Environment Division, as well as the unit responsible for gender here at the WTO. Thank you so much for the collaboration towards this very important discussion. And as you know, women economic empowerment is at the heart of our work here at the EIF. The topic for today's conversation is even more important as we're celebrating the 3rd anniversary of our Empower Women Power Trade initiative. This initiative, which I hope you all know about, helps to improve the policy environment, remove trade barriers for women's economic empowerment in least developed countries to increase their participation in trade. I hope you all have your warm cup of coffee, tea, your favorite beverage at hand, and you're all ready to delve into today's discussion. I promise you it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very exciting. And before I turn over to our speakers, I'll just present a few housekeeping rules. We hope that we will have a free-flowing and dynamic event. So please feel free to engage with us through the chat. Please, if you have any questions, we're more than happy to allow you the moment to engage and interact with us. We also have live interpretation available in French today for a Francophone audience. I hope you know how to enable it, but if not, please select the language at the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining via desktop, just click again on your preferred language. If you're joining via mobile, click the button that says more at the bottom of your screen and click on the interpretation icon. If you have any challenges, feel free to reach out to our team that are also on the call. They'll be able to help you. Just send them a note. Today's session will also be recorded, and so please feel free to watch it later through our YouTube channel. And we really look forward to the engagement. Please keep those comments coming. Please keep the questions coming. We'll be more than delighted to hear from you. So as I start, I'll first invite our two directors to present some remarks as we open. And I'll start with the director for the WTO's Trade and Environment Division, Mr. Holim, to present his remarks. Ho, over to you.
Thank you so much, Annette. And good morning to everyone. My congratulations again to you, Annette, Ratnakar, and the whole EIF team. And it's a great pleasure for us for this year's International Women's Day to be collaborating, the WTO's Trade and Environment Division. Certainly very pleased to collaborate with the EIF, with our WTO Gender Focal Point, and all the other colleagues to really put a spotlight on the positive linkages between empowering women and greening trade. As many of you would have heard, our Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, she often reminds us that trade is about people. And she couldn't be more correct, if I can say. WTO's very founding agreement, the Marrakesh Agreement, clearly states, and it gives us this very particular mandate to work so as to raise standards of living, whilst recognizing the important objectives of sustainable development and environment protection. So in a way, the Marrakesh Agreement, the WTO agreement, encourages us to try and seize a triple win agenda That's a win for women, women for sustainable development, and a win for trade. And I think this kind of approach should really be at the very heart of WTO's work. So, and I think this in a nutshell already frames the discussion that we are going to be having over this coffee chat. Trying to look at it in a little bit nice way, this question, how can we improve economic outcomes for women while protecting our planet, and how can trade help? Now, firstly, of course, trade is a very powerful tool. It's a tool that can bring technologies to where they are needed the most. When we think about it, the products that are needed to support, innovate, and optimize the local economy, these are often obtained through trade and via trade again through supply chains. So when we enhance access to supply chains and facilitate trade, we are often at the same time also raising standards of living or providing the tools by which standards of living can be raised. So it's a very concrete and direct relationship. Let me give a couple of quick examples. For example, when one looks at, say, the elimination of tariffs to certain environmental goods, these could help women business owners to access more markets, to have better inputs to their business. And that access and the better inputs could help them grow their businesses. Lower tariffs, for instance, could also increase productivity through the same chain that I've just mentioned. And it's not just me saying this. I mean, there has been ample research, some by WTO and also by many other institutions, that show that unjustified, discriminatory, and non-transparent tariff measures and non-tariff barriers can hurt women traders, particularly micro and small and medium-sized enterprises. So again, a very strong policy point to be thinking about. And more generally, as we see the transition towards a more climate-friendly economy, towards a greener economy, new opportunities are taking place, And in the past, we used to think of the green economy maybe too much as a niche issue, which it certainly isn't. And today it's really, I would say, a mainstream part of the economy. And within the green economy, we do see a lot of very fascinating new entrepreneurship, lots of innovation by women entrepreneurs in many sectors. And just to mention a few, these could range from environmental services to the circular economy, to areas in food, to ecotourism. So a very rich agenda of opportunity. And my last point, or last 2 points, if I can say, it's on the WTO perspective, how can WTO help? Certainly one thing that we are doing and which we really will continue to do more is to work with a wide range of partners. The EIF is clearly a very strong partner with us on this. Working with the EIF would be very important, in particular with the LDC members, but we work with many others beyond the usual international organizations. And also within the WTO itself, we have different avenues of discussions which have taken place. And these all point more or less to the same things that I've been saying about how can trade policies help remove barriers on green and gender-friendly technologies. Just last year, members at WTO launched 3 new initiatives on trade and environment, the so-called ministerial statement initiatives. These cover a wide range of trade and environmental sustainability issues. And within these discussions, we hear also from the members about the need to look at the gender perspective. If we look at our own trade policy situation, we have an environmental database and we track all notifications and trade policy reviews. And we find that over the last decade, there are actually quite concrete references being made in these measures to addressing gender and environmental considerations. These are reflected in trade policy review reports, as well as in national measures. The Committee on Trade and Environment has had various discussions over the years about national efforts to promote trade policy that supports sustainable and inclusive development, including for women. Such experience sharing could be further enhanced and further mainstream. A very, very key committee at the WTO, just to give an example, the Technical Barriers to Trade Committee, not a place where you would normally think of as an area where we would have a gender-based discussion, but actually that's also happening. In areas of regulations and standards, the TBT committee has started to discuss the gender impacts of trade and how these discussions could be an important avenue for bringing the gender dimension more directly into domestic regulatory efforts. And regulation, again, has a very close connection to trade. So these are just a few examples that, what we're talking about here today is actually very concrete. And I'd just like to finish here also to mention a very recent collaboration we have been having with the Clean Cooking Alliance. We had an event with them last year to mark International Rural Women's Day, but we're building on that collaboration to today, actually. I'm really pleased that the CCA, through Charlene, is able to join this panel. I'm sure you will hear very interesting points from Charlene. And I think that, this type of collaboration can show very practically the important role of trade in enabling a robust and sustainable economy. And very finally, I'd like to thank my own team, in particular Ludovinta Miotti and Gagana Kiskinova for their assistance in collaboration with EIF colleagues for the event. So I wish you all a very good event. I'll be following through the event. And again, thanks a lot, Annette and Ratnaka. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for those insights. And I hope we'll hear more once the other participants speak, including Charlene. And do feel free to come again later if we speak about areas that are important for you to talk about. Now I'll invite Ratnaka. Ratnaka, over to you.
Good morning, Annette, and thank you, Ho, for making my life easier. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and to our distinguished panelists. Happy International Women's Day to you all. International Women's Day has always been an important day for the EIF. It has, however, again increased significantly over the last 3 years. This is because this marks, as Annette already mentioned, the anniversary of the launch of Empower Women Power Trade Initiative, a key milestone in the EIF history. This initiative is important as it demonstrated the increased mainstreaming of trade, a mainstreaming of gender perspective in the EIF programming, trade programming. This initiative, building on our previous successes, has trained 88,000 women in value chain practices, supported 10,000 women in adopting new technologies to increase the quantity and quality of their products, facilitated the participation of 809 women in trade fairs, contributing to more than 400 million in export orders. However, within these numbers are the real human impacts, and these are very important elements of the results of our work. Testimonies such as that from Ms. Rebecca Helmi, the owner of a leather handbag startup based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, are worth sharing. Rebecca attended training organized by EIF and International Telecommunication Union on how to leverage digital marketplaces and tools to create a strong brand. These trainings helped her increase sales while successfully navigating the COVID-19 lockdowns. Just last week, while on the field in Uganda, we heard another testimony from Ngombe Women Group, beneficiaries of an ongoing handicrafts project. This project has increased women's income, and beneficiaries testified to being more financially independent. Training received in products development led to an increase in production from 200 baskets a month to 600. This group is just one of the 29 groups who have been benefiting from our support to this project. The art and crafts work produced are sold on the local and international markets. These products are being made of local natural raw materials, following a sustainable approach. These stories demonstrate the practical impact of trade-related interventions that target women's economic empowerment. They also signify that additional collective action will make a huge difference. The urgency of climate crisis and the lingering impacts of COVID-19 pandemic also underscores the importance of even more comprehensive approaches to women economic empowerment. Support must therefore be formulated in ways that contribute to environmental goals, is sustainable, contributes to recovery, and builds resilience. I extend a huge thanks to all our partners with whom we work closely to achieve this important objectives of ensuring trade gains for women, thereby contributing to a number of sustainable development goals. I also thank Ho and other colleagues in the Trade and Environment Division, and Anush in Trade, who is the Trade and Gender Focal Point of the World Trade Organization, for making this event possible, for the contribution that you provided through your thoughts and ideas, and also for working together with my colleagues led by Annette, Hang, Apurva, and many more others who have worked in the background to make this event possible. I wish you a productive deliberation. Thank you very much, Annette. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ratnaka. Juan Ratnaka, thank you. You lead us very well into the conversation. And now we'll start, and perhaps I will start by introducing our distinguished speakers. With us is Ms. Anush De Bogojan, Head of the Trade and Gender Unit at the WTO. Anush, you're welcome. We have Molly Olsen, CEO of Fair Trade Australia and New Zealand, and a valuable partner in a number of ways. We have Dr. Letitia Pettinotti, Senior Research Officer at the Overseas Development Institute. Our gentleman on the panel, Mr. Watney Ayelu, Program Coordinator at the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, ICIPE. We have Toiga Semisi, Assistant Trade Officer from the Ministry of Fisheries and Trade in Tuvalu. And finally, we have Ms. Charlene Onyango-Ball, Senior Manager of the Operations and Compliance from the Clean Cooking Alliance. You're really welcome, and our audience are waiting to hear from all of you. And I'll start straight up with Anush. Anush, we know and we've learned that the more we work on building a gender-responsive, sustainable trade ecosystem, the more we see the need for gender-responsive policies. And you've done a lot of analytical work in this regard. Would you kindly share with us your perspectives on the relationship between trade, gender, and climate change, and really looking through the use of innovative tools and the circular economy? Anush, over to you.
Thank you very much, Annette. So I'm really happy to be here on this very important day. Obviously, you know, I'm at one of the trade and gender experts in the WTO. This is a very important day for us. So I will go quickly. I know I have very limited time, so I will stick to my time frame. I would like to say that actually in developing countries, women are natural resources managers. They collect and store water supplies for cooking, cleaning, and farming. They gather sources of energy and manage the lands, whether it's forest, wastelands, farmlands. Women also provide food as subsistence farmers and fishers. They hold this unique position in society because of the historic division of social roles. Through this role, women have actually become experts in maintaining biodiversity and have developed eco-friendly techniques, thus preserving their environment. They have developed specific ways of reusing wastewater to maintain supplies. For example, they are also experts in plant management and growth and have traditionally been dealing with wild seeds. Through this knowledge, they have developed innovative and environmentally friendly techniques in agriculture, for example. Also, with their expertise in handling medicinal plants, they have provided care for their families and communities. In coastal communities, women are also key players in maintaining marine biodiversity as seashore small-scale fishers. So in a way, and in some, women are already circular economists. And what I would like to talk about is how trade can support or can be used to foster this very important role women have. And I will give you a few examples of that. First, I would like to say that actually trade gives access to clean technology for women. I'll give you the example of solar ovens in Madagascar. I see Charlene is here with us, and she will have so many more examples and so much more to say about this. But it's just giving a trade perspective on this issue as well. And so if we look at Madagascar, for example, the country is facing deforestation. It has lost about 40% of its forest in the last 60 years. And one of the reasons, actually, women are part of the problem in Madagascar because they are using charcoal or wood for cooking. And so they are also part of the solution, and trade can help. How trade can help is that it gave access to women to new technologies such as solar ovens. And this is empowering women in different ways. First of all, it gives them more time to do other economic or social activities. They are less at risk, less exposed to risk related to wood gathering, for example. It gives them a healthier environment. They don't have to inhale those fumes from the wood which is burning. And on a more economic side, they're also saving money because actually when they are using these ovens, these solar ovens, they are actually they cut the firewood or charcoal consumption by half. And annually, actually, they reduce their cooking energy cost by about a fifth of the official minimum wage. So I think that's a very important aspect, sort of empowering them economically as well. They are learning new technologies, which is also quite an important aspect. Women are always less skilled and have less access to capacity building programs than men usually, but also when it pertains to the green economy. And of course, they contribute to the protection of the environment because through that, they reduce the household CO2 emissions. So one issue here I would like to highlight is that women have access to this new technology, but actually it can be quite costly. And as I pointed out, they also have like the skills to use these new technologies. And this is where also trade policy and Aid for Trade can help. Actually, if you look at the main gender responsive trade policies that WTO members have established all through the years and their Aid for Trade programs, a lot of them focus on building women's capacity or accessing financial schemes, for example. And so by crossing these gender trade policies with environmental trade policies, the ones that Ho was talking about earlier this morning, then it could help women in the green economy and in green trade. And actually, the WTO is working on this aspect to really sort of cross these different policies. The second point I would like to make is to say that access to clean energy infrastructures can foster women's production. It can help them scale up their businesses and actually enhance their exports. So I'll give you an example in Mali. And I would like to take you about 200 kilometers south of Bamako. And I would like you to meet with these women that are shea butter producers. And they have built these cooperatives in the very isolated rural areas in Mali, where they don't have access to energy. And so they were able to have access to electricity through a renewable energy infrastructure, which was set up in their rural areas. And actually, these women were able to, through having access to this electricity, they were able to work most of the day as well as into the night, which allowed them also to produce more than 3,000 packages of shea butter, cream, lip balm, or soap every month. This productivity, with this productivity, they were able to supply the demand in Europe. Often the fact that businesswomen are not involved in international trade is because of the small size of their businesses and the lack of capacity to supply the demand. So here it helped them really get into those international value chains. So this is empowering women in different ways as well. Of course, they produce more in better conditions. There is an increase of income through the increase of production and exports and access to international markets. It also helped them to diversify their economic activities. Actually, they use the money and the grid, the renewable energy grid, to provide different services. They bought a few computers and they were putting these computers to the use of their different communities. So it's all about, this issue is all about poverty reduction. And usually women reinvest their income into their family and their community. And so this is where we see from a testimony from one of those women. She's saying that, she wants, with the money, she wants to buy some cows and to give it to the women in the community so that they can form a cooperative that leases out cows and other sort of agricultural equipments. And with that money, she says, I will send my daughter to school for her to become a teacher. So this is 100% women's empowerment. A third example I would like to say is also that access to clean technology fosters women's exports. So I'll give you an example in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ivory Coast, where women have access through a program led by the FAO to new generation smokers that help them actually comply with sanitary and phytosanitary requirements and have access to international markets. So women in Ivory Coast are mostly involved in the fishing, let's say, sector by smoking the fish that is caught by men at sea. So, and now actually, thanks to the program at the FAO, women are equipped with these new generation of smokers. It's a clean technology that addresses many aspects of the fish smoking operations. And actually, this is empowering women, again, in different ways. So it gives them access to international markets. For a long time, for actually almost a decade, for example, the European Union had banned these sort of products because it has high levels of what they called a PAH, which is a carcinogenic substance that is coming from smoking food. So these fishes had higher level that are not complying with the requirements of the EU market. And so through these new technologies, through these new clean technologies, they were able to help the fish processors to meet these very high international safety and quality standards, and therefore were able to access those markets. And so basically we can see that women fish processors have become more competitive at the regional as well as sub-regional level, and with smoked and dried fish products of much better quality as well. It allowed them to also diversify their activities for increased income. So they were able to smoke a larger quantity, as I said, of better quality, better tasting fish at a reduced cooking time. So that was also something that enabled them to go into other sorts of products, such as fish crackers or oil cooking, all these sort of residue coming from these new technology that they were able to collect and reuse. So again, as I said, women are really circular economists. A third example I would like to highlight is in the services.
I'm sorry, Anush, if you could try to wind up, please. I'm worried about the time.
Absolutely. So a few points about this aspect of services. Export sectors can provide economic opportunities for women in environmental services. And there is a very interesting example of in the shrimp sector in Indonesia, where you have this female entrepreneur that has developed a way for farmers to understand the quality of their water, so that the shrimp don't get sick, and so that they can also comply with the requirements on sanitary and phytosanitary measures on the international market. Through these products, she was able to foster Indonesian shrimp market, which is a very important export sector for the country. And she was also able to hire other women. So it's all about, again, women empowerment. On the circular economy, and this is my very last point I would like to make, is that there are numerous examples where women are involved. I would like to give you an example, and for you to think about maybe about waste, informal waste pickers and female informal waste pickers. Often they are not included in the supply chain, but actually in some countries, like for example or in some cities like Bogota, for example, they are actually building their own companies. They have been recognized by the Constitutional Court as having an environment contribution to the city, and so they are actually involved in various supply chains in the waste management. Another thing that was mentioned already is ecotourism. A lot of women are in that field as well. But of course, with COVID-19, it has put a stop to these kind of activities. A lot of women had to, lost their.
I'm sorry, Anush, I really have to stop you now. Very, very interesting examples, all the way from Madagascar to Bamako in Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Bogota. Really interesting and very, I think, key message there is that women are circular economists, and there are ways in which we can foster this role. I will now turn over to Molly. And Molly, the work that you lead clearly illustrates that climate change actions, which take gender into account, can lead to women's economic empowerment. And I think this is really important, and drawing from the work of fair trade. Why don't you, Molly, share your perspectives?
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor, in fact, to be here today. And I will be very brief. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion as well. So from Fairtrade's perspective, maybe I'll share just a couple of little statistics that put us into the perspective of why women's empowerment is so critical to not just fair trade supply chains, but to all of us. A quarter of the global population are female farmers. Women carry out 68% of the labor for cocoa farming, for example, but they only earn 21% of the income from cocoa. And around 60 to 80% of the world's food is grown, in fact, by women. So everything about how we survive on this planet actually comes back to how we are treating and empowering women and what their role is. So for fair trade, empowering women is important. And gender equality is a key part of not only fairness within our supply chains, but it's to secure the supply chains themselves and ensure consistent quality and productivity. Women ensure that the returns on trade are fair for the whole community and for their families. So they have a very vital role in what fair trade does and how we do everything we do. Recently, we did a study in Papua New Guinea that showed when a woman has more control over the sale of cocoa and the management of the money that comes from it, there is an increase, a measurable increase in the income of the household and the welfare of the family. So it's a very core part of what fair trade does and in the standards. I guess what I'd like to say about fair trade's perspective on all of this, and it really is very exciting for fair trade to be doing a project with the EIF and to be discussing these important issues, because our belief is that you can engineer for a fairer outcome in trade. And I know that was the original purpose, and that is a high mission of the EIF. But in order to engineer for for a different outcome in trade. As Ho said, it is not designed structurally for the kind of fairness that we would all like to see. And in fact, when we look at women and women's roles in these value chains, they very often don't have control over or power in the decisions that are made about a variety of things that have to do with how the farming is conducted or how the resources are used after the items are sold. So if I'll quote here Elizabeth, who's a member of our Cantoni Coffee Cooperative in Kenya. If a woman is empowered, then the house will also be empowered economically and socially, she says. And one of the ways that fair trade does work with women is that embedded in the standards that underpin everything that fair trade does in terms of a structural change in how trade is conducted, it includes sort of standards on people, planet, and prosperity. So it includes things like governance, like protection, child protection. It includes mitigation and adaptation to climate change. But where women are concerned, there are specific standards about no discrimination, about no tolerance of gender-based violence or any other forms of violence. The identification specifically is required for disadvantaged members of a community and for minority groups to be able to have a plan to support their engagement in fair trade activities. And of course, there are gender policies, but probably one of the most successful programs that we've run in the last few years, and we've run them now in Africa, Latin America, and we're just starting to run them in Asia, is what we call the Fair Trade Women's School of Leadership. And the purpose is to empower women and youth to speak out for themselves and to build the confidence to support their communities, to promote inclusion in producer organizations and to try to bolster equality in these communities. And for example, the Women's School of Leadership has 10 modules. There's a specific module on human rights broadly and women's rights specifically. There's, again, the fair trade standards that are shared in these modules, both in terms of the specific standards and the strategy for gender approaches in fair trade communities. The confidence building is really critical. Many of these women just don't have the confidence to speak out and to feel empowered to express their opinions in many circumstances. So there's a whole module on cooperation and group cohesion. There's a module on women's leadership, specifically on women and the economy, on budget management, on income generation and diversification, on negotiation and influence, and that's really about sort of trying to share power, and masculinity and gender equity, because we of course find, and I'm glad to have Ratnakar and Mr. Ho here, we actually can't do this on our own. In order for women to actually be able to have the appropriate support, to have not control over their communities, but just influence in a constructive way in their communities, we need everybody participating. So it's really tailored to specific coaching, to creative engagement, to utilizing the strengths of the participants. We support the producer organizations to engage when women are developing their gender policies. We help them to support increasing the number of representatives in the producer organization on their boards, and to enable generally women's participation to be more fulsome in their organizations. We recently had a graduate of the Women's School of Leadership, and she said, I used to think that I wasn't useful to my community and that I should just work on the land. I didn't think that as a producer, I could do much beyond my own plantation. But through my participation in the Women's School of Leadership, everything changed. My vision changed. I realized how much I could do for my cooperative and my community and for my personal projects. And that was Julianne Asoko from the Ivory Coast. So I guess fair trade has a very, generally we take a sort of systemic approach and a structural engineering kind of approach to what kinds of outcomes we're seeking, how we would measure those outcomes, and how that could then be bolstered in a systematic way. And fair trade could scale that across the 75 countries we work in around the world to support fair access to markets. But I don't want you to think that we don't absolutely focus on the core purpose of fair trade, which is actually getting markets for producers and supporting companies to invest in those value chains and recognize the additional value that they're given. So for example, in the really exciting project we're doing in East Timor, we recently, in our second only EIF steering committee in our first reporting period, we were actually able to report that we had achieved one of the whole of project goals, which was we achieved 8 containers sales of coffee. We were only in the whole project over 2 years expected to achieve 6. So we in the very first reporting period struck that one out. We had $68,000 in premium that went directly into the cooperative. The cooperative is benefiting 4,820 farmers. So that's a very substantial amount of community investment that can be put back into those communities. We were able to access 3 new markets for East Timor coffee, and those were Canada, Japan, and the United States. Of course, for fair trade in Australia to benefit from these sales, we need to get our companies in Australia buying these. So we've got tests out. We're trying to sell East Timor coffee here in Australia as well. But this is just sort of a way that fair trade does take these issues with gender equality and youth inclusion very, very seriously. It's a robust and systemic approach that we take. We engage in these communities in a way that helps support them to achieve these outcomes, and all the while recognizing that the best way to empower women is to help increase sustainable livelihoods in their communities and enable them to be active participants in how those resources are then used in their families and communities. So it's a great pleasure and honor to be here talking about these, and I love to get to the discussions, and it's really great to see all of you, and really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Molly. I really hope that we will have time to engage with our audience. Everything that everyone is speaking about is very interesting, very exciting. And I really think from your presentation, equipping women with soft skills, very, very important through that work in the School of Leadership. Thank you very much. I'll now turn to Dr. Letitia with ODI. ODI is doing a lot of interesting work, analytical work on gender integration in climate policy. So, Dr. Letitia, why don't I hand over to you now?
Thank you very much, Annette. And thank you to Anush and Molly for setting the scene, because I have a few things that will tie up to what you just said. For my intervention, I'm going to focus on an example of work that comes from a research project ODI did with the support of the EIF on agricultural digital platforms. Digital agricultural digital platforms are mobile apps or SMS-based services that aim to support value chain upgrade and basically improve trade terms for small farmers so that they can increase productivity, capture value addition, and fetch higher prices. So we looked at a range of digital agricultural platforms used in 5 rural districts in Uganda. And a few platforms actually directly support climate action. So I'll give 2 examples. For example, some platforms provide information like climate services and agricultural extension services, which can improve resilience to climate change through advising for practices that, for example, improve soil management in case of water scarcity. Or another example is those agricultural platforms that provide support so that farmers can match sustainability standards and certification and hence fetch a higher price for their products. And that joins back to what Molly was describing just now. And so now one aspect of the research focused specifically on highlighting the barriers smallholder women farmers face so that they can improve their trade by, for example, complying with sustainability standards or improving their resilience to climate change. And so what came out, in short, for women to trade green using platform, it came down to 3 parameters. First was access and control over resources. 2, capabilities, and 3, safety. And these together shaped women's economic empowerment. So let me give a bit more detail on that. So first, access and control. The agricultural digital platforms provided enhanced access to finance and credits. They reduced information asymmetries, and as such, they improved women's access and control over resources and opportunities for trading up in the value chain. But in the first place, and that's where there is a bit of a catch, is that having access to a mobile phone and to credit to top up, and so hence to access digital platforms, also requires control over resources. So there is always a dual shaping, because same for capabilities. So the second parameter, on one hand, the capability for women farmers to navigate and use digital platforms is conditioned by the level of digital literacy. And on the other hand, the platforms are a way to get access to training for the women farmers, and so to enhance their capabilities. And then the last and third parameter related to safety, and that's whether women are safe, because many women users actually reported the fear of online harassment as a barrier to them joining certain digital platforms. But the apps also potentially could offer official mechanism for reporting harassment. So what I wanted to show here is that it really brings to the fore that these three parameters shape women economic empowerment, and they are not direct products of trade and value chain policies in the strictest sense of the term. They relate to a whole set of policies, from access to finance and its linkages to land tenure security, to gender-based harassment, education, and childcare provisions. So women economic empowerment results from a whole set of macro and microeconomic policies. And so what this shows is that policies shape individual opportunities. And Molly hinted at that, is that our economic structures are not gender neutral. So the distributional impact of policy changes, so for example, support for digital agricultural platforms, will impact different groups. So for example, women and men farmers, and subgroups within them differently. And I say subgroups within them because women is not a homogeneous one block group, right? There are other intersecting variables, such as women's socioeconomic status, type of employment, so formal, informal. I know she was talking about informal waste pickers, for example, but ethnicity is also a factor, the sectors they work in. So all these together shape women's participation in the economy as consumers, entrepreneurs, wage workers, producers, and in our case example, as small agricultural producers. So knowing that, what can be actionable advice for designing policies that work towards greater women economic empowerment and climate resilient growth? And I will propose 3 points. The first is to carry out distributional analysis with as much as possible data disaggregation per sectors, geography, socioeconomic status, because we want to avoid gender and climate blind policy design and implementation. So that's the first one, distributional analysis. The second would be to decenter from a focus on trade policy alone. And we're already doing it, but more, of course, is always better, because we need to bring in a whole of government system approach, as gender equality and climate action are both agendas that require systemic change. And this really becomes clear when distributional analysis is undertaken, because it highlights what are the ramifications of a proposed policy change to other policy fields. It connects agendas. And the third point is about funding. Finance is key to acting durably over time to effect change, and change can take some time, as we all know. So as a recap, advice for gender and climate sensitive policy design would be to do distributional analysis, adopt transversal system approach, and durable finance. And I will stop there and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you so much. I think there's a lot there, and I hope we'll have another conversation to unpack these 3 parameters and these 3 solutions that you provided. So much there, very interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Letitia. I'll now move on very quickly to Mr. Watney Ayelo from ACIPE, and I hope you all love honey as much as I do. Over to you, Ayelo. Why don't you talk to us about the apiary sector and all the interesting work that you're doing, how bees are actually contributing to maintaining an ecosystem and sustainable forest conservation. You're on mute. If you can unmute, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Annette. Good morning, good day, good evening to all of you. I'm speaking on behalf of a long list of partners we have, and the long list of women who work with us in a number of projects, one of which is supported kindly by the EIF. I'm based in Addis Ababa, working for ACIPE. I'll speak specifically on how bees can become an entry point to make a good change happen, to serve gender equality as well as environmental conservation. In a number of projects that we implement, we have a very specific focus on women and environment. I'll provide a few details as a contribution to the panel. It's a privilege to also specifically highlight how this can become a good entry point for driving the linkage between gender equality and trade for the team. At ECP, we have a set of commercial insects that we promote to support livelihoods while also sustaining environmental values. And in the process, there are lots of opportunities for trade and rural prosperity. In this particular project that I mainly speak about, we are using honeybees to generate jobs for women, young women, and men. But in this particular case, we specifically target disadvantaged women who are officially unemployed, underpaid, or even unpaid at community level. And we identify them, provide them all the training, very much like any other beneficiary, provide them the technologies and the opportunities to grow their businesses. And in the process, they get around the various cultural barriers that hinder their active participation in commercial beekeeping. If you are not aware, women are not encouraged because of cultural barriers to actively engage in serious economic activities like beekeeping. Resource limitations being one, but culturally also there are reasons. But for us, we specifically target women to become active participants in the development process. And in this particular project, we set minimum target of 35% women. That is how we started earlier on. And now we have moved as far as recruiting 100% women to have women-only beekeeper enterprises in our project sites. And these women demonstrate how beekeeping can become a means for economically empowering women to become active partners for trade, for major traders in the beekeeping sector. And in the process, we also promote a very socially inclusive and environmentally sound commercial beekeeping. How do we do that? By the way, beekeeping does not have waste. So it's very much in a circular economy that we promote commercial beekeeping, apart from the various values that we have at the institution. The bee forages that we promote for commercial beekeeping have multiple services to the environment, to livelihood, to the women themselves, and to the bees. And we specifically target areas that are either rehabilitating or marginal, so that the additional bee forages that we promote as part of the project can also contribute to environmental rehabilitation for the long term, not just for the short-term purpose of supporting beekeeping. And we encourage women to have legally registered SMEs, enterprises that can have equal access to public services, loan, and even resources and opportunities like the projects that I'm describing here. They have equal access to the marketplaces, product aggregation and processing facilities that we support in the project. And they can also own assets, unlike what can happen naturally through the traditional practices. So they can become, in their own right, traders in the business. And that is happening in a big way in our projects. And one important, I think, observation that we made was that experienced women beekeepers can become good models. They can become coaches. They can become mentors of other young women to follow them. And we are building on that opportunity through this project. And we have good examples to share on how that can happen. So these are how we are linking women empowerment with trade and environmental values. So second part of the panel discussion, how can we work together? What are the next steps for us? One, we can develop projects that combine these various values together and promote circular economy, while also addressing gender equality issues that we care about. Second, we can promote also equal access to the critical resources, land, credit, trainings, technologies, and other services. They may not necessarily have equal access to these services under the traditional system, but in these targeted projects, we demonstrate how well that can be done. The next step that we can do is try to mainstream these good learnings through experience sharing, peer-to-peer learning, and developing also similar projects elsewhere by scaling up so that we can mainstream these learnings for other environments to benefit. And one last point, we should not underestimate the capacity that women have to become mentors, to become coaches, to become models for other young women to follow. They can articulate the issues better, they can convince them better. Let me stop here by thanking the EIF and all other partners who have supported us to demonstrate these good practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much for that inspiring work by Sipe. I really like the angle that you're targeting disadvantaged women. I like the experiences that you've shared. This sector offers a lot of potential. So thank you very, very much. We still have 2 speakers before we open to the audience. I really hope we'll have the time for our audience to engage with us. And I'll now move very quickly to Miss Semisi. She'll be speaking about farming techniques and the use of smart climate trade of products. Over to you very quickly, Ms. Semisi.
And good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to extend my great appreciation to the organizer for such opportunity given for our small country Tuvalu and personally to me to be part of this important occasion. And happy International Women to you all. Given the time limit at this point in time, I would like to share with everyone the activities the Department of Trade and other government agencies managed to implement on farming techniques with the involvement of women. First of all is the EIF project, which support LDC to be active players in the global trading system. It works towards a wide goal of promoting economic growth and sustainable development by helping reducing poverty. The assistance helps to mainstream trade into the national development strategy, setting up structure to coordinate the delivery of trade-related technical assistance, and build capacity to trade by addressing the critical supply side constraints. In 2021, the Trade Department, through the EIF project, organized 3 sessions of training to our people on how the new innovative ways of farming helps them to produce fruitful crops, given the status of our country vulnerability to climate change, which affects the salinity of our soil. There were around 10 participants in each sessions, and it is calculated that 75% were women. The training includes planting of climate resilient plants, such as pandanus trees, which holds the soil enriched. At the same time, products pandanus fruit, which through value adding can be a source of juice. Add on to that, each participant was provided with tools to do their own farming and gardening. Apart from the pandanus training, we do also focus on planting coconut trees, which can withstand adverse weather conditions, and byproducts obtained from it, which includes virgin coconut oil, red toddy, and others, that can be a source of living for many households. This activity in line with the Tuvalu Coconut Market Rehabilitation Plan, which vision is to realize the full market potential of coconuts and making a major contribution to sustainable rural livelihoods. In the plan, it also highlights the involvement of women through the National Council of Women, facilitating the domestic trade in coconuts and its value-added products, such as having education campaign on promoting the benefits of cooking with coconut oil. This year, there will be a similar training session conducted on all 8 islands because of the success of the FNAFUDI training. And there is a demand for such training to understand that climate change is a reality, but we also need to be proactive to combat it ourselves as well at the ground level. The training with Outtalents will target to have 20 participants, and each participant will also provide necessary tools after the training. Furthermore, the agriculture departments do also provide various of trainings for people, and results that stated that many women participated in these various trainings. There is a farm association which works to support their families through home gardening, and 3/4 of the majority were women. Higher number of women participated in home gardening competition and cooking competition as well. Given the COVID crisis, the Gender Affairs Department conducts food gardening competition for women on the capital only. This competition was created with the intention of getting women to do farming activities during these COVID times. At a time in 2020 when food was scarce, lockdown was very strong, and fresh vegetables were high in demand. The Gender Affairs Department, with the support of the Taiwan Technical Mission, initiated a move to get families involved in farming. All these activities were complements with the government of Tuvalu current plan on the National Food Security Project and Tuvalu National Food Pathway, coordinated by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Agriculture to mitigate the effect of COVID and the climate change. Therefore, to conclude, it is vital that women be empowered to initiate farming, expand and grow their knowledge, and get proactive in their farming activities, because there is help and support already in place for those that do need it. Thank you very much, and looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing those experiences from the Pacific. Capacity building, knowledge we had about the coconut sector. I will now quickly move on to Shalene from the Clean Cooking Alliance. And we heard earlier from Ho about the collaboration between the WTO and the Clean Cooking Alliance. And Shalene will share experiences on advancing professional talent and business trajectory of women entrepreneurs. Shalene, over to you.
Thank you so much, Annette. Hello, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. So I'm cognizant of us having the time to be able to have a fruitful conversation. So I'm going to highlight the work that CCA does in this space, the kind of work and collaboration we're hoping to do with WTO in the future, and really the overlap and intersection between trade and women and clean cooking solutions. So for some level setting, the Clean Cooking Alliance works with a global network of partners where we build a dynamic, inclusive, and financially sustainable industry with the goal of achieving universal access to clean cooking by 2030, which is really around the corner. Our goal is for this to lead to improved health, reduced climate and environmental impacts, empowered women, and improvement of livelihoods. CCA was founded in 2010, and in this time, more than 400 people have gained access to clean cooking fuels and technologies, with more than 4.6 million lives saved from harmful health impacts. And this is particularly important as the world navigates the COVID-19 pandemic. Tied to the trade and sort of the overlap between clean cooking, the affordability of cleaner and more modern stoves and fuels is a key access enabler to clean cooking for very, very many vulnerable and poor communities around the world. Trade can be a solution to this problem. The reduction or elimination of tariffs and non-tariff barriers on clean cooking goods across the board, from LPG to smaller clean cooking tools and assets, the use of appropriate trade policies and international standards. These have the potential to energize trade in the clean cooking sector, because money goes where money is, sorry. It also enhances this dissemination, and it allows for access to cleaner solutions and technologies to make clean cooking solutions more affordable by reducing their costs. As we speak, 2.6 billion people lack access to clean cooking solutions, costing the world more than $2.4 trillion in damage to the climate and local economies. So there is an impact on trade from both an environmental perspective and an economical perspective, and from the social well-being perspective, which is very important. So the simple facts. A large percentage of women use cooking for their livelihoods. A lot of us have seen this, where, when we go to marketplaces, restaurants, food shops, and to kindly note, what kind of cooking solutions are being used in those markets, so that you have a better picture of the problem that we're trying to solve. It's often with firewood or with charcoal or with other unsafe mechanisms. A majority of women use cooking to sustain their families, meaning a lot of women are cooking multiple times a day, exposing themselves to smoke, to these emissions and other unsafe cooking methods. And women and girls are most likely to collect firewood and cooking resources for their families, as Anush mentioned earlier, when she was speaking about Madagascar. This is a time commitment that takes away from them trading and being involved in the global economy, and especially for the younger girls who could be in school, gaining future skills that make them more valuable and able to contribute to their labor force, to future labor force. There are also social issues to do, with their risk and their safety, because firewood is collected in forests or areas that are far away from where they most probably live. Regarding trade, and fundamental to remember is that women are 50% of the workforce, and a strong and innovative economy requires a healthy workforce. Is it possible for us to have this when half of our workforce is being exposed to unhealthy, clean cooking methodologies and tools? No, it isn't. And as I mentioned earlier, as a global economy navigate COVID-19, it's never been more urgent to address this from both a health and a trade perspective. Regarding the work that CCA is looking forward to doing with WTO, one of our major challenges, as I mentioned before, is the trade barriers and policies for taxation and duties. In certain economies, there's a 50% VAT tax on clean cooking tools. This means they are not as accessible, not as affordable, and are thus not going to be the option that the average day woman looks to for cooking in her household or for her business. In CCA's industry snapshot, half of the respondents said that lowering tax and duties on clean cooking products and materials will be beneficial to trade and to the sector and to the products we use. Tied to this, the sector thus needs behavior change, as was mentioned before, and leadership from women. This is possible when we have businesses that are fruitful and can grow in the sector, and are particularly tied to such a big part of what their day-to-day and health looks like. So we're hoping to work with WTO on policy, trade policy, what's favorable and what enhances women's participation, around building capacity of governments and implementing agencies, supporting design of policy that's favorable for clean cooking and women to be able to trade in clean cooking and to be able to enable and support the sector. There's a lot more nuance and a lot more fun facts to that, as both Paul and Anush mentioned earlier, but that's the level setting, and I can share more as we have our chat.
Thank you so much. Very, very interesting hearing from you, Charlene, and really important work that you're doing there. It really speaks to the lives of ordinary women that are involved in household chores and are involved in really looking after society, if I can simplify it that way. We had a very, very interactive engagement from our audience. I will only take perhaps just 2 questions quickly. And I hope that maybe Molly and Letitia could take them. Sorry that I'm putting you on the spot there, but I'm very confident that these are questions you could speak to. So for you, Letitia, women traders are quite vulnerable to climate shocks, e.g. flooding, drought, which can affect them negatively and economically. And if you have any additional thoughts on how to make them more resilient, possibly through access to insurance or other financial protection. And this was from Maria Karuru. We have another one, which I'll address to Molly. To be sustainable and inclusive adds cost to the business, in turn increases the price of products and services. So how can women businesses balance this? Their cost of production is already high, and they're not very competitive in the market. So I'll take those 2, and hopefully there'll be a minute or so to come back again and read some of the messages from our audience. Over to you, Letitia, and then to Molly.
Thank you so much, Annette, and thank you for these questions on the chat. Yeah, women more vulnerable to climate shocks. This exactly relates to what I was discussing earlier, related to control over resources, related to capabilities. Why is it that women are most often more vulnerable than other members of their communities to climate shocks? And that's why it's such a huge question, how to increase resilience It's obviously underpinned by many parameters and it's very context dependent. And for sure, a more developed insurance market would be contributing to that. Well, I think one parameter that I could link back to all the discussions we've been having is actually related to women's soft skill and networks, because one thing that comes again and again, even though resilience is, as I said, context dependent, is that networks for information sharing, be it in terms of training and what works, to adapt, albeit whether there is a heat wave coming, these sort of networks, or merry-go-round, for example, in East Africa, these sort of networks are what really increases resilience. And women are tremendous at building these networks, maintaining them through what I guess is care. So I think this would be one thing that perhaps we could look into as a more like intangible. And I'll stop there so that Molly also has time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually look forward to having conversations with you too, Letitia. These are such important issues. And I just have to say one little thing about the climate issue. We are in the middle of massive floods here in Australia. We have had massive fires. We have, the thing about climate is it's apolitical in its attacks, and climate justice is one of those things that really needs to be embedded in how we think about the world, and people that don't have the resources to react to these things and protect and mitigate against them is going to become a more and more significant issue. And so I just want to sort of flag that climate justice and fair climate approaches and fair carbon, really the whole carbon trading thing is so unfairly unfolding in the world today. So that's another topic for another day. But on the question of costs and how difficult it is and how small and medium enterprises can't address these things, I would simply say that absolutely this is true. And these are very real and tangible day-to-day challenges that every business faces. But fundamentally what we have with the price of many of these goods and services is that the cost of production is just beyond the market price. And so we've got to educate the market. We've got to bring companies and buyers into these value chains that actually understand the difference between a properly sustainable product and that one that doesn't have slavery in its fashion or child labor in its processes. We've got to be able to educate and to bring in those buyers that will understand what the real cost of those services are. And sometimes it's actually confusing. So in coffee, for example, in the last 5 years before the coffee price spiked recently in this last year, basically if a farmer wasn't getting the fair trade minimum price and that premium, then he was basically, or she was basically subsidizing the global coffee market, because the minimum price only was reached by the commodity price for 3 weeks in 5 years. So that means that price is just not an adequate price. It's something like 7 cents per cup of coffee that a farmer is getting for that coffee and for all the labor that's going into it. So one of the fundamental problems that we are dealing with is that this is a structural issue. In terms of the day-to-day though, I would say it's unexpectedly the case where, for instance, again in coffee, if you can help with the quality and the productivity, which women often do very much faster and quicker and better than men often do in these cooperatives, if you can get the quality up and if you can add organic to that premium, you actually can get the price to a price point where you're reaching into a specialty coffee market. And that's where, for example, we've been able to help with East Timor. So it is absolutely true that these cost barriers are real and they are very specific to businesses, and they hit smaller businesses harder. But there are ways to address them that I would encourage us to have really robust conversations about. And part of it is dealing with the broader market and commodity issues. And part of it is how can we help bring those products up the supply and value chain so that actually they can command a higher price, like organic and fair trade, for example.
Thank you very much, Letitia and Molly, for those responses. We have just about a minute left. With hindsight, we should have organized a leisurely lunch and not a coffee chat, because at the time is simply insufficient. There's so much to talk about, and I really feel we'll be leaving off with our audience yearning for more. But if you allow maybe another 2 or 3 minutes for us to really conclude in a neat way, because I'd like to maybe go back to maybe Ho or any of the panel members in just a minute if there's an extra word that you'd like to share. I'll give you that time and then we will finish. Yes, Ho.
Very quickly, and I think it's been a great conversation, and we really look forward to carrying it forward. As you say, we need more time, and we look forward to coming back to it. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, I do take away that, and I do promise our audience that we will be coming back to pick up this conversation. I just feel there's so much more that needs to be shared. Anyone else from our speakers that would like one final minute, one final word? Just let me know. Yes, Ailu.
Yes, okay. Access to resources is key, as I said earlier on. Land in particular is very difficult, and in the context of Africa, particularly in Ethiopia, women may not be entitled to own land. In the projects that we demonstrated, we have innovative ways of providing access to land to women. It is possible. There are lots of marginalized, unused, and rehabilitating areas to which beekeeping can be responsibly developed. And that's exactly what we are doing without making any pressure to the environment or to the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's one sector, and there's many more sectors that can make that contribution to sustainable trade. We had lots of feedback and comments in the chat. Special skills obtained from the older generations of the family should be highlighted. Another one around looking out for the bigger businesses. Most programs are targeted to the small-scale traders, but bigger businesses as well need the trade. There's a lot more that came through. Great question there from Dari Iqbal on technology and the private sector and their benefits. We weren't able to respond to all of these questions, but we will prepare a report. We'll pick out all these questions. We'll follow up with our panel members to provide their insights so that when you see the report, you can see your question answered. And I hope in that way, in some ways, we will have addressed and listened to you and addressed the comments or perspectives that you wanted to share. I really want to conclude here. We are already 2 minutes past our time. And I would like to thank the panel. I would like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much for your insights. And maybe I'll take away 3 key messages. Women are natural experts of resource management. I think we had that. They are key actors and role model players in making the global economy greener and more sustainable. So empowering women to access clean, affordable technology and value chains to build their resilience and to promote the circular economy is essential moving forward. Let's take that away as a key lesson from today's conversation. Trade policy and trade capacity building are instrumental in this endeavor, and we need to work together towards a triple win within the trade agenda: win for women, win for environment, and win for trade. And there's a lot of evidence on the ground that confirms that proactive and joint actions by all partners are vital. I mean, we had all the examples, different institutions working together, from building awareness to knowledge sharing, to confidence building, to the right policy measures. And here at the EIF, we're a global partnership that are keen to work with partners to take all of these actions forward. I hope that with those few remarks, we will close it off here. I'd like to thank our interpreters. Thank you so much for that great job. I'd like to thank our audience. Thank you so much for your patience. I've only taken away 2 more minutes of your time. And to our great speakers, you were excellent. I wish this was longer, but we have to finish. Thank you so much. Happy Women's Day to all of you. And we look forward to speaking again. Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day. And good night to those that still have to go back to their beds. Charlene and Molly, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much, and speak again next time. We close off here. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, Annette. Fantastic.